Okay, yeah. So, as I said, useEffect, fetch, and custom hooks for today. So, component lifecycle. Yeah, what do you think it means? Well, what does it mean? Component lifecycle.
When I say the life cycle of a component, which means birth, life, and death of a component.
Yeah, pretty much. Exactly. So yeah, as you said, birth, everything between, and death, right? So this is a life cycle. And we have quite a few, remember last time I showed you that we have quite a few stages for life cycle, like will prop updates, etc. Will unmount, this is for death, but we have quite a few kind of events during the life of each component that you can catch. So yeah, exactly. Basically you mounting, updating, and unmounting. If we kind of simplify that into three things. Sorry. Yeah. So useEffect covers all of these. And as I said, with class components, you had slightly different way of doing that. But now useEffect covers all of that. And we are using useEffect. So we need to kind of learn the syntax and how to do that with useEffect. So useEffect is a function that takes a callback, right? As you remember from, let me just remove all of that because we don't need it. So import React from React and useEffect. Like this. So if you have useEffect, it takes a callback function, right? So the parameter to useEffect is a callback function, right? The first parameter. And the second parameter is the array of dependencies that you want to trigger this function when one of the dependency will change, right? Yeah, so here, as I said, the callback is called whenever the dependency changes. And you specify it as an array.
So the dependency is that the component then?
Sorry?
The dependency, what is it? Is it the component?
Anything, like anything. You can create, basically you put any dependency, like you can pass a prop or you can pass some value. I like to create a simple example. Let me just create some, I don't know, h1. I don't count. I will quickly create a counter. h2. And two buttons. So div. And here I will have button. Or just one button. We don't need many buttons. Oh yeah, let's do two buttons. So increment, and we will do decrement. So let me just create two functions for that. Decrement. And we will do like set count. Let's do the count plus 1, right? And decrement minus 1. And here that will be increment, that will be count plus 1. So we need, because we try to manipulate with count, we need to have a state, right? So we're importing state as usual. And let's do use state. And here we will have our count. So initial is 0. Here we will have count, and yeah, so on click increment, and on click decrement, something like that. So let's see what we have. Yep. So we're supposed to have decrementer and increment. Yeah, so it is working. So now about dependencies. If we here, I want to console log just useEffect, just to show you when we trigger this callback function. So when I load, I'm triggering this function, right? You can see my console log here. So when I'm start clicking, it does nothing. So when you pass, again, we discussed it last time, but when you pass the empty array, that means that you will run your callback function for useEffect only once on initial load, on mount, right? And now coming to your question, what is the dependency? It can be anything. And let's say that if count changes, I want to call useEffect. Right? So now if I refresh, every time I'm clicking, I'm actually calling my useEffect. Yeah?
And also at load then.
Sorry?
It also seems like it called the function when you loaded the array.
Yeah, exactly. So it is calling on initial load, plus every time I'm changing, change the count, it will trigger that function.
Yeah.
So it is very useful when you have children and parent. For example, if you're passing a different prop and that prop will change for any reason, it will trigger your callback function. Yeah?
Yeah.
So again, it's basically on when you want to do something specific on specific event on the update, you just pass that as a dependency to your as a second parameter to useEffect.
Right.
Yep. Okay. Yeah. So as I just showed you, so we have. Ooh, look at this. I think that we syncing. To be honest, I didn't remember that we had this. Sam, the other instructor, he created this one, but it looks like we're synchronized. Yeah. So yeah, basically this is what I just showed you. So every time you click, you're updating the we're updating your we're calling your callback function. So on mount, as I said, you need to set only empty array, and this is it. And this is like forget about like just think how you can get. If imagine that you have a list of users. Let's imagine that we want to render a list of users, and we want to render it. We want to render, like, let's say here we will have users, and here that will be an empty array on initial load. Set users, and here we don't have anything. We just simply rendering users. So I'm doing how to render users. Can you tell me?
How to render users?
Yeah.
Just well, just add users. No. Yeah, I think that's it. No.
So users is an array, so you can't render it, right? We want to render a list of allies. right?
Yes, you need to spread it. No.
No.
You do it for
Not for, but
a map loop, sorry.
map, exactly. So we have user, and we will return a lie, and we will have yeah, user. And here we need to add key. Don't forget about key. We will have just user. Let's say that we have array of just names, array of strings. So here we have nothing, right? And that's fine. So how do you think we should fetch data? Let me just go to our previous exercise. I need to find the URL. Props filtering, user list. I'm just looking for an endpoint. Tum. 1 second. Found. That will return only one user. Okay, so how do I want to handle fake API?
You have that link inside. I can share the link.
Do we?
Let me go through.
We have 10 users here. That's fine. We can use this one.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So how do you want to fetch? So this is our. Let me just put. This is our URL. How do you want to handle this? How do you want to fetch users?
So you have your.
Sorry. So I have a URL. Let's try to think how we can do that.
Do we do something like? So you want to add a function that mounts, I guess, the URL to the users, or as a user fetch function.
Okay.
That takes the, I guess, the URL as an input.
Okay, so yeah, let's think about just JavaScript. So we have a function that needs to fetch users. How do you write it with just pure JavaScript?
I forgot. It had to do with fetch.
Yep, fetch. That's correct. So here you're providing your URL.
Yeah.
Then you have what?
And then you need to do convert it into a JSON file.
Yeah.
REST.json.
Yeah. Okay. And you will have you will have your users, an array of users, right? Based on the API, they will return us array of 10 users.
Yeah.
Yeah, so this is pretty much it. So the only problem that this one is asynchronous. So how do we handle asynchronous?
Yes. You want to add the async await? Yep,
async. And here, let's say const users, right? And here we will have await. Or maybe fetched users. Okay, and now we potentially want to return these users, right?
Yeah, return fetched users.
Yeah, or maybe just to simplify it, we don't need to have a variable because we don't do anything with this variable. We're just doing this.
Yeah.
Yeah, makes sense. And maybe because we are so efficient and looking for lean code, we can just do this. Right?
Yeah.
Okay, so we have fetch users. We know how to get users. Perfect. When do we want to do this? When do we want to call this function?
At start. Oh, no, because no, yes, at start we want to have something. So would that mean that in use state you don't want to have the in 9.5 you don't want to have the empty array? But,
Yep. Yep. Exactly. So const fetch users and sorry. So here we want to const fetched users, and that will be await, right? Sorry, wait, await. Yep, await. But that means that this one should be async. So we will have a warning from React, but we will fix it in a second. Okay, so we are getting fetched users, and all we want to do is just set users to fetched users, right? This is it. So let me check the structure. We have geo username, we have name. So here, that means that we will have like ID, and here we will have something like name, right? Because we will have each user is an object, and we want to render name.
Yeah.
Yep. So,
yeah, will it not? Yeah, okay, so yeah, we'll give you a list of names. Yeah.
Yeah, list of names. Let's see. So we actually have this. Yeah, looks like we have list of names. So here you see the problem straight away. So I mean, this is what I said, that you will have warnings that this is asynchronous, and you just can't do that. And actually, it suggests in you how to handle that. So the React already saying that you can fix in this way. So that means that all I need to do is basically just wrap this into function like init, which is async, just another wrapper, and move these two lines inside. And then just call my init here. Does it make sense?
Is it because you didn't have the async before, you just had the await?
This is because we have async here, and React says that the callback, your callback should be synchronous. So I can't put async here.
Ah, okay. So your anonymous callback needs to be
synchronous.
Synchronous.
Yeah.
And that's why you created init that is synchronous. Okay.
Yeah, exactly. So now we shouldn't have these warnings. So let me refresh. Yeah, we don't have these warnings, right? And we call it only once. So I found that some people just struggling with the concept, with the idea when they need to fetch users, because if you put, for example, this here, and for example, const app, and say that okay, you can do async and my users. I just want to show you. Let me comment it out. This one, and I will put my users here. Let's see. Ooh, okay. Invalid hook call. What's going on? I'm pretty sure, yeah, so React will throw you an error, but you can... I'm just thinking, yeah, because here it is async, that is why. Then you can have await. And then you have a few more errors because it's undefined. So let's check if it's defined. Sorry. Here. Empty array. What's going on? Why it's redirecting me? It's not a function. Let me check why. Okay. Const users to render. I'm just trying to think, will that allow me at all to do the oh, sorry. Yeah, my users or users to render. Let's try. No, still same. It's not a function. Right, because this one is a promise, right? So that is why we're still failing. Okay, yeah. That's fine. That's fine. Theoretically, we can just check is array, right? Is array, as we normally checking this stuff. If so, use this, else use empty array. Let's see. Yeah, as you can see, it doesn't work because it is asynchronous and you will always have your empty array. And every time you modify anything here, let's say you have more complex component, every time you modify it, it will do another fetch and you're wasting your calls. So you basically, every time you're fetching data again and again and again and again, so you're wasting calls and traffic and make your application slower. So
why do we need to use effect? And I was just wondering, can we have it in use state? For example, on line 5, you have this use state and then you have this empty array. Is there a way, or I don't know, that's, I guess not, but I just wonder, why can't we have the fetched users at the initial loads on use state and kind of work with use state rather than use effect?
Yeah, if you want, you're saying do this async. Oh, sorry, wait. Are you saying this?
Yes, correct, yes.
Yeah, so to have a wait, this one should be async, right? So let's see what we will have. Let's imagine that we have this function there. Cannot access URL before, oh yeah, sorry. Are not valid as React collection or children use array instead, right? Wait a second. So we potentially can do something like that. Still the same. Not valid as React children. So we have a promise. Yeah. We still have a promise. That is why it doesn't allow us to handle this. But again, this is even if you make it work, even if you do this, again, every time you imagine that you have another state like counter, every time you change the counter, you will trigger this stuff because you're re-rendering component.
Right, okay.
So you're executing this. You actually, this is, and let me just move everything back. So this is how you actually handle fetches on initial load. You have your useEffect and you have your empty array dependency. So that means on mount, and you actually fetching your users on initial load. So this is how you normally handle in real life fetching. So if you refresh, we have it, and we have no errors, no warnings, nothing.
Yeah.
Again, this is real life code basically. So yeah, this is how you need to handle your fetch requests. Of course, you can do something like on click, right? So we can do, I don't know, add button fetch users and have on click fetch users. And maybe we can refactor this one, or let's say, let's create a handler, users handler. And here I will create a function, const fetch users handler, which will basically do this, what we're doing here, right? So we will comment it out our useEffect. Async here, right? So if I refresh, we have nothing. But if I click fetch user, we actually fetching users, right? So this one is valid as well. So you're basically creating an event when you want to fetch your users, right?
And on this one, you didn't need to do useEffect. You just use the simple, or the use statement.
Yeah, because fetch is just a separate thing, it's just JavaScript way to get data. So if you want to do it on some specific event like click or whatever, you will trigger that by click, right? So you will do this on click. But if you want to do it on mount, when you initially load the component, you need to use your useEffect.
Yeah. Oh, that makes sense.
Yeah. So refresh, and we have it. Okay. Questions on this one?
Not for me, no, thank you.
Nope. Okay. So let me actually add our counter, because I want to show you an example when you have some dependency. Let me just add two buttons. H1 count, and we have two buttons. Button increment, maybe just increment on click to increment. And here I will add another state, which will be 0 by default, and count. And we have count. So increment handler. Let me just create const increment handler. And here we can have, I just want to show you another example. Yeah, let's have our fetch here. No, not actually this one. Sorry, I just want to change my. Sorry, I just lost for a sec. So I just want to take our account plus 1. So let's refresh. So now we can increment our counter. But what I want to do, I want to say that every time I change my count, I want to refetch my data. Right? So I'm creating dependency. So in network, let's clean, refresh. We just fetched users on initial load. And if I click increment, I'm doing another call, right? So let me check, does their API allows us to get user by yeah, we can get by ID. Let's do that. let's actually do this stuff here. So I want to, let's create that we can provide an user ID, hit submit, and we will refetch data and render this specific user, right? So we will create for tiny form where we will have a button with submit, type submit, not commit, submit, and submit. My gosh, will I spell it?
Wow.
Submit, and input should be number, right? Something like that. So, and the value, yeah, we don't care about the value. So here, let's say user ID is, let's say user ID. So I want to change this one to user ID. Set user ID. And by default, because we don't have 0, we have 1, right? So now I don't want to fetch all of them. So we have fetch users to fetch all of them. Or we have fetch user where we will pass an ID. And we will concatenate it with our URL, right? ID. Yep. So now, on initial load, I want to fetch user with user ID. Sorry. And I don't have map because I will fetch only one user.
Yeah.
So I will get rid of this one. I will have probably H3 or something. And here I will have user.name. But remember that if I don't have a user, so initial load, we will get an error, right? Because we try to get name from an existing object. Because that one is asynchronous. So let me save. See? Oh, sorry. Where do you have count? Let me, yeah, let me just, user is not defined. User, oh right, we need to have a user. User, and that should be null by default. So save. We are getting error because it is on initial load. So how to render this conditionally? Can you remind me?
Put like a ternary saying username exists with a.
Yeah, but what do I need? First,
So, sorry?
yeah, so what the first symbol that I need to put?
The question mark. Well, are you not supposed to put user.name question mark?
User. So first of all, it shouldn't be user.name because user is not, it's false, so we are failing user.name. So user,
User
question mark. And then you want to have this.
Name or no, or just like empty H3. Right?
Okay. What is missing? Is it valid?
You're supposed to put it in brackets so that
Yeah.
it's not.
Exactly. Because when you combine it with JavaScript, HTML, JSX requires you to put brackets.
Yeah.
Okay. So now looks fine, right? The only thing that we are not doing anything on initial load. So let me just do the on initial load. I want to fetch and store So fetched user, something like that, right? So initial load, we got the first user. Yeah. So now, if I want to basically do another fetch, and I can on click, so we have a few approaches, but let's say const form submit handler. So I can fetch my specific user with ID, right? I can provide ID to the user. So here I need to have event. Then I want to have event.prevent default. Prevent default. Then I want to have const value, and that should be target, but not target value, but target query selector, right? Selector, because I want to find the input, and then I want to have value. So basically we will have the value here. So let's try console log value. I commented out this one, and here I will add on submit. Right? So you have an on submit event. When you click, be preventing default, getting input value, and console logging. So let's say 3. We have 3, right? If you change to, I don't know, 5, submit, we have 5. Beautiful, it is working. So here we have two options. First option is to basically fetch user, like const fetch fetched user, await, right? Because this is asynchronous, and then do basically this. I want to do what I'm doing here. Yeah? Does it make sense?
So you're doing fetch user user ID.
So value, I will pass value.
Yeah.
Yeah?
Set user, fetch user. Yeah.
So this is one option. And that should work actually. Let's refresh for, yeah, we got the fourth user, indeed. So fourth user, let me just check, is Patricia. Perfect. But I'm just repeating this logic again, and I already have it here. So what I can do is actually just modify my user ID So I will set the user ID, right? And put it as a dependency, right? So now every time I modify user ID, I will trigger useEffect. Does it make sense?
Can you repeat that again?
Yeah, so now I've just, when you click submit handler, I'm just updating user ID, right? In state.
Yes, so you're playing with state and you're saying that rather than play with state, you want to play with useEffect.
Yeah, so now, because I've updated user's ID, and this is a dependency that will trigger my function. My callback function.
Yes, and which one is preferred? This one, the user.
Yes, because you might, you don't need to repeat yourself. You just put in this as a dependency. So every time you modify something that you want to refetch your user, you just put in as a dependency, right?
But you still need to do set user ID in this version. Where do you see the line 30, the value, constant value as events.target?
What do you
still
mean?
need that.
Say again, what do you mean by where do I see?
You still need to have that function, the form submit handler.
Yeah, because I'm submitting form every time and I want to take the value and basically update my selected user ID, and that will trigger this one, right? Because we have a dependency.
And if we don't do that and just use the use state, will it still work?
You mean like doing this here? Are you asking about that one?
Yes, so that we don't. So user ID on line 20 becomes remains empty array.
Yeah.
And then you exactly just do the set user.
Yeah, but that means that you're repeating this part of logic that you're doing here. And imagine that this is a bit more complex, where you're just getting, I don't know, manipulating with the array or with this array or with this object, etc. So it becomes kind of bigger. You don't want to rewrite it again.
Got it. Okay. All right. No, I understand. I didn't see that there was actually doubling it. Yeah. Okay.
So now, when you submit the form, we're just updating our user ID. And because we are updating user ID, that will trigger our useEffect. Right? So if I refresh, press 4, submit, we have Patricia.
Perfect.
Yep. Because we
I'm doing that at the gym, but for my brain.
yeah, so, and to make it even more clear, let's create a component, user component, and I will create user component, default, and that should be user. And here we will move our user inside. And we will move this useEffect to my user. So we need to add useEffect. And we need also useState. So we're moving everything to separate component, right? We put it, yeah, here. And we want to have this condition there. Right, so we have everything related to the user we have here, right? And the user ID now will come from props.
Yeah.
So now every time we change this prop, that will trigger our useEffect.
Yeah, and that useEffect is local, then it's at the component level.
Yeah, so here I will have just import user from user, And I will just put it here. Here we will have user ID, which will be user ID, right? Right, so we have fetch user, which needs to be here as well. Sorry, I need to add it. We also need the URL, because we don't need it here. We don't do any logic with, let's have the constant here, the URL. And we have, I think this is it. So on this level, theoretically, I don't like the idea, so that will work, but I don't like the idea that we are getting string and we have a number. So just to make it cleaner, we will do parse int, right? Just to make it like keep this is the same type of the data. So now you can see that it is very independent, right? And here you have your component and you will trigger update and refetch data only when you pass different user ID. So now user ID is 1 and you fetched the data. We can check it in network. So we fetched. But if you change it to 5, hit submit, we are refetching data. Because this is triggering user ID change, triggering your useEffect, and you're getting the new data. So this is actually like real life scenario when you have some dependency from the parent, and when this dependency is changing, you do something with your useEffect. Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, so this is how we basically work with, first of all, with fetch, because fetch shouldn't be on the top level. It should be basically hidden into some action or some lifecycle event. It shouldn't be on the top level. And yeah, sorry. Okay. Yeah, so here, we already discussed that if you have dependency array is empty, that means that you just unmounting. Callbacks change whenever you change the dependency. Yeah. Okay. So here we also discussed already this asynchronous. So you need to know that this will throw you a warning. It's not an error, but warning. And also theoretically we can do something like that. We can do like loading birds, if like the same for our users, if it's loading. So technically, if you go to network, change it to slow 3G, refresh, we have form, but it is nothing here, right? And then it appears. So what we can do is if user, so we check is user truthy, we can do something like p, come on, p loading, right? So we have a fallback to make the user experience more pleasant. So if I refresh, loading, and then your user.
Right.
Yep. And yeah, so this is it pretty much with this one. Yeah, here we also have like early return. So that might be like you might use it as well. It's more about structuring your code and make it more readable, I would say. So we have like a early return. So that means that if user is falsy, return loading. And then you don't need to have this condition because you have an early return. So that will hit this one, check, user is falsy, then run, return this one, and you will never reach this line. But if it's trueC, then you will get to this line. We call it early return. You might remember that from JavaScript module. So now, if I refresh, it still works as it was. Yep. Okay. So the next step is unmounting. And for unmounting, we already discussed last time. What do we have for unmounting? How to handle that? Do you remember?
I don't. I remember you need to create another useEffect, but I can't remember what you need to put in.
So it's basically you need to have your useEffect. So you have useEffect. Technically, you can do that inside the same useEffect, but if you want to do like on initial load and initial like mount and unmount, you have return. So that will be triggered on unmount basically. So return takes a function as well as a callback, and you will get it on unmount. And let's actually do this with some flag. I will create some button. And here I will have something like if is user visible. I want to have text hide user. Oh, sorry. Else I want to have show user. And here I will have on click. So I basically I'm creating a toggle user visibility handler. And const. So we're creating this. Goodness. And set is user visible to is user visible to opposite user visible, right? This is how we toggling things. Here by default we want to have is user visible, and that will be like that, and by default that will be true. So now here I will have my condition. So if it's visible, then render our user. So we actually mount our component. And let's do that here. So console log mount. And here we will have another console log which will be unmount. Yep. So let's try. So refresh, loading, refresh, loading. Let me change to quick one, load. Yep. So if I click, so we have mount here. If I click hide user, we have our unmount. We're triggering unmount. And show user, mount, hide, unmount. And by the way, if I go to fifth, oh, wait a sec. No, that will keep. So look at this. If I provide, for example, ID for submit, I have Patricia. If I hit hide, it doesn't exist. But if you go to network tab, and I will show the user, so I will mount again, that means that I will refetch the data, but I will refetch the data with all the selected input value, with the selected ID. Yep, does it make sense?
The latest ID, right?
Yeah, the latest ID. So the first, the one I selected before.
Yeah, that makes sense. Just can you show again the code to see how it's kind of vanishing? How do you see it go away? Is that because you use effects?
So here, yeah, here in my app, I have a condition: is user visible?
Yeah.
And
so
when
you say visible and true, and if it's not, then false.
yes.
And if it's false, then how do you see it kind of being empty?
I don't actually render it. I have, this is if, without else.
So we're saying if it's false, then nothing.
Yeah, exactly. So basically, if it's true, render this. And for else, we have nothing to render.
Yeah, okay. But this is not unmounting, right? I don't see where did you use the...
This is how you unmount. You're removing the element from the DOM completely, right? Because if it's false, you will never render this. So basically, you're removing the element.
Yeah, okay, but I was just trying to see that how do you link this to the code above where you have the console log mount unmount?
It's not about. It is in user, because I'm not unmounting app. I'm unmounting user.
Sorry, it's a user. Yeah, okay, got it. Okay.
Yeah. So basically, that means that here, when you have this false, you will remove the DOM. And that means that you will call this return in user.
Got it. And if you were to delete that use effect or comment it out in here, would it still unmounting it from the DOM?
Yeah, but you will never. But you don't do anything on unmount.
You wouldn't see the console log.
Yeah.
That's true.
Yeah. Exactly. So that means that you can put some extra logic for yourself, for whatever reason, on unmount before you unmount.
Okay. Okay, which then explains the name use effect, so the effect to it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, cool. I thought there was more. I thought it was also doing the actual, unmounting rather than doing effect to it. But now I understand. Thank you.
Yeah, no worries. Yeah, so this is the whole idea that you can actually, based on some event of lifecycle, you can do something. You can trigger something, whatever you need.
Right.
Okay, so here we have an example, and I think I used the same example on the previous time. That when I told you that if you have like time, for example, here you have timeout, and you're actually waiting for something. I've used actually set. I was talking about interval, that you have like a counter, and when you unmounting counter, you want to clear the interval. But here we have a timeout. So when you started something, you started your timeout. And oh yeah, let me actually show you. This might be a good example to show the difference. So here I will create set timeout, and I will not put anything. let me just paste console log. I will console log something. Console log. Hello. So let me set to 5 seconds. And yeah, this is pretty much it. So let's test it. So refresh, refresh. Let's wait 5 seconds. We have hello, right? So if I refresh and unmount component, so I unmount it, I still getting hello later. This is what we don't want to have, right?
Yeah.
So that means that we have a running process behind the scene, and we already removed this element. So why we have still running process? So mount again, unmount, wait a few seconds, getting hello. So this is wrong. That is why you want to do something like clear timeout and your timeout ID. So now if I refresh my page, click, oh wait a sec, I forgot about my console log. So now refresh, unmount, and as you can see, I don't have any message. So we're actually killing the process behind the scene. And this is actually when you start building and working with React, it's very easy to miss, and that might have a drastic effect, like huge effect on your performance. Because if you start playing with, I don't know, whatever you have, and you mounting and unmounting or many instances, you might kill the app and without knowing what's going on and why it's happening. Because it's very easy to miss. You just
you clear timeout at the moment you unmount, yeah.
Yeah, before you unmounting, you running this function. And you clear your timeout in our case.
Okay.
So again, it is very easy to miss, very easy. So pay attention. If you use with some asynchronous code inside your useEffect, you need to think about how do you want to terminate this asynchronous code when you unmount the component and the process hasn't been finished. Yeah. Okay, any questions on useEffect?
No, not for me, thank you.
Okay, cool. Yeah, so the next stop is custom hooks. So you can actually create custom hooks. So useEffect is a hook, right? So you're creating something. This is a hook where you can just get data or do some action on specific event. So you can create your own hooks, and they are basically functions. So here, let me just go to the link because we have a library. So basically somebody just wrote a lot of custom hooks for you, and you can just use it. I will like use toggle custom hook, for example. And here is a very simple example that you create in use toggle. And you don't have a toggler, right? You pass and you creating your hook, and you're returning you're returning the reducer. In this case, that might be not very obvious. We will scroll down in a few seconds to other one. But here you're basically returning is on the value, and you return in a function to toggle it. So you don't implement anything here in the component, and you can reuse your toggle, use toggle everywhere. If you have like 100 togglers around your... Hey, Thomas. Thomas just bored. Let's wait for him. Ricardo, how is your React? Ricardo? Come on. Okay. Thomas, can you hear me?
I hear you.
Okay. We need to wait for Thomas. Can you hear us? Thomas, we are here. Connection. Hello. Thomas?
I'm here. I think he's the one with connection issues. No, we cannot hear you, Tom.
No. Ricardo, how is your React so far?
Not so good, to be honest. I'm just following up with the classes, like a general intro to the whole thing, but no coding at all. I'm booked on PHP at the moment.
I see. So you were waiting for React so long, and now you don't have time.
Yeah, I need to really carefully look into this, and definitely I don't have the time to do so now. But since I've attended the classes, by the time I'm back to this, I should be able to follow up with the videos on YouTube. And you guys are always around in Slack, so I feel that, you know, like, I'm gonna be with you guys for a long time.
I see. Okay. Hope your clients will wait. Hello? Thomas?
Hello?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Hey, that's my
You're disappearing. Hello?
Sorry?
Yeah, you were disappearing.
Now?
Yes.
Yeah.
Now better.
Okay, thank you. I think it has to do with my browser and my internet connection. Sorry about that.
No worries. Yeah, so can you see my screen, Thomas? Thomas, can you see my screen?
Yeah, it was you.
Okay. Yeah.
The connection is really bad. I can not really hear you.
Okay. Can you see the screen?
Now we can hear you.
Now I can hear you, yeah?
Yeah.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, perfect, thank you. Sorry about that.
No worries. Yeah, so custom hooks. Sorry. So custom hooks is basically reusable piece of functionality, and where you can kind of store cache or cache some actions for your application. And here's an example. So again, this website is just a bunch of hooks that somebody created. And in this example, for example, you have toggler. So you implement in toggle once, and then you can use this toggle everywhere in your application. Even if you have 20 toggles in different components, you can just use toggle, and that will work. So the first item here will return you the value. Second will be your basically action, the handler that you want to do. And again, if you scroll down, let's check something. Use async, use required. For example, authentication, right? So somebody created authentication for Firebase. And here in your component, what you will do is just use require authentication, but you need to create this hook as a separate thing. And in your hook, you will have some user authentication, router, and you will have useEffect that will change something that will basically check is the user authentified. Yeah, and here basically you just redirecting the link and you returning your auth. So, and again, you can use this function in different components, wrap some components specifically if it requires authentication, and this is it. So we call it custom hooks. And let's go further. We have some routers, use auth, one more. Let's go, you can see that that might be big. Because imagine that if you have that kind of component, you have, sorry, I'm just scrolling to find, yeah, this is your hook. So it can be very big, and you don't want to repeat this code for every single component. That is why you outsourcing the logic. So hooks are basically just a piece of logic. They doesn't have any layout. You just outsourcing some logic that you want to handle everywhere and you want to use everywhere. And you creating this hook, and then you just have them and you can use them in the component. Also, so like use auth. The name comes from the convention. So you can use, when you create a custom hook, you call it use whatever you want. So use kittens, for example, or use whatever. And React will recognize them as custom hooks. Let me find some use event listener. Let's actually play with coordinates. This one is pretty simple. Yep, so let me just copy all of that to our app. Let's say we have, I will create another component. Another component, JS. RAFC, and this one will be export default, and this one is another component. And here, so I will have coordinates, sorry, here. So use state, and here we will have use callback to get coordinates. Sorry. And use event listener. So we will have use event listener hook. Let me just create this hook for me. I will copy paste it to my to separate file, because normally you storing your hooks in separate files, and you call them like you create a function like hooks, and then you will create I don't know, use event listener, the name of our hook, and then you, for me, I just copy paste in it this code here, and we can now import it. Import from imports where is it? Use event listener from. We have hooks, and we have this one. And now in my component, I just want to console log the position. So let me just import another component. Another component, and I'll add it to my view. So I think we have everything. So in my component, I'm actually, yeah, we're catching everything. Perfect. Use state is not defined. All right, sorry, I need a few things. I forgot to copy. So here, use state, we probably need, let me check quickly. What did I miss? So we don't have use state, but we have use ref. We have this, okay. And here, I will do that. We have use state, and we don't have use effect and use ref. Something like that. Not okay. So it says that we are not importing, and I believe that in my hook I have use event listener. Yeah, I'm not importing actually, exporting this one. So export default. Save, refresh. Okay, so now you can see that we have the functionality to listen the changes, right? It's listening the movement, but I can use the same.
Can you show again how it's so how the hook is?
This is the actual hook.
So you're here in use listener.js, yeah, and you export it. Export defaults.
Yeah, I'm exporting the hook, the whole hook, and
how? Oh, sorry.
yeah.
I was gonna ask, like, how is that hook implemented in the component, in the another component?
So this hook just returns you a data. So here, you just take your use event listener, pass the event type, mouse move, because it is expecting. So we define it here. So
okay.
Event name, handler, and potential. The third element is element or window by default. Because we're not passing third element, it takes a window as a default element. So we're passing just two, and handler for us is just use callback. This is React hook, another one. And you specifying that you want to call this, you set in coordinate on change. So this is another hook, basically. It might be too complex for this example, but this is how you're implementing. And now, every time you want to have this functionality, you don't need to rewrite all of this, because this is basically like a, in OOP, like a class. But here is like you creating an instance of this code, and now you can reuse it everywhere. So if I do the same, if I want to do the same here, I can do that in my app, and I will create some h1 here. Let's add some h2, and let me just copy this here, and we potentially missing some, maybe not missing use callback. I just want to check that we actually have everything in. Yeah. So now we have two instances, right? So we need to import it, right? We need to import use event listener from hooks. And you can see that we have two instances, right? So again, you normally use hooks to outsource some authentication is a good example, because you want to authenticate to have to run authentication for specific views, and you don't want to rebuild the whole logic, or you want to basically just pass the data and get an instance of authentication and just check something. Or you want to for example, you want to fetch some data, you want to pass some details to the hook, and that will fetch your users or do whatever you want. So you don't need to, let's say you've defined one way of fetching users because it requires credentials, it requires some other stuff to your database. So you're creating a hook where you're doing all of these things, and then you just use it. You create like use get users, and you will have you will get your users, and you can use it in your application everywhere. You basically just using instances of this hook. Does it make sense?
Yeah.
So again, this is more advanced thing. So I like on the beginning of your career, let's say, you will definitely not write your hooks, but yeah, it's just a concept that you need to know that React provides you some hooks like useEffect, useState, etc. But you can also create your own hooks, whatever you want, basically. And here, this URL is actually a very good example, because you have quite a few hooks that are pre-built, and you can actually, they have all code examples, you have everything here. And I remember I was looking for some hook a while ago. I think that to memorize the scroll position, and they have, let me actually check. I remember that they had this. Use hooks, memorize scroll position. Persist, hooks, GitHub. That might be. Yeah, so here they have some other example dependencies. Nah, I mean, yeah. So anyway, you can just, I don't remember what was that, which one was for that I was looking for, but yeah. Here you have quite a few, and you can create your own custom hooks, which is great, which is actually very helpful. Sometimes you actually want to memorize something. So when you're re-rendering component on mounting and unmounting, you might want to store something, kind of cache, and you can also create custom hooks for that. Okay. I think this is it about custom hooks. Do you have any questions?
No questions, Arena.
Okay. Again, I would say that for you, focus on useEffect, because this is, I think it requires time to practice and understand how does it behave and how it works. I will publish our exercises now after the lesson, and yeah, you can play with useEffects, and yeah, that should be fun. I think that we have, let me just double check. Okay, we have one exercise for this week, but you might say that this is a big one. So we have a banking app. We have a design for that, and yeah, it's just a big one. But I think this is a good example how you can, where you can practice all these use state, props, components, use effects, fetching data, etc. I think this is a great thing for you. We have a design for that one, so you will check the design. As well, we have a Figma link in the repo. And yeah, this is it for this week. Also, on Wednesday, we will have React routing. So remember, I showed you that everything goes to index, basically to the root URL. Even if you navigate in between views and like faking, basically having different multiple pages, you're still on the root. But with routing, you will be able to actually have multiple routes and go to specific pages, etc. So yes, that will be for Wednesday. And next week will be for Redux. So 2 lessons of Redux in JavaScript and React Redux.
What is Redux?
Redux is a global state. So here we use in our application, we have like use state to store some data. But Redux, that means that when you unmount your component, you will lose this data, right? Or if you have, I will like explain all of that next time. But the whole idea is that if you want to pass data from one component to another, which is not a child, but some, I don't know, some cousin or something very, very far from this, like on the tree, you need to have a global state for the application. So every single component has an access to it. And that is why you have Redux.
Right, okay.
Yeah, but again, we will discuss that next week. 2 lessons for that. Okay, if you don't have any questions, I think this is it for today. And I'll publish, I'll share slides and publish exercise now.
Cool.
Thank you so much.
No worries. See you next week.
Thank you.
See you.
All right.